People always ask me, how do I find the time? And I will be the first to admit that I am very, very busy. I have a full-time job as an iOS developer for Trello, and I speak at conferences and travel around. On top of that, I'm a mom. My husband and I have 2 young daughters, and they're already heavily invested in hobbies and activities, and we're constantly driving them around. But on top of that, I do a lot of volunteer work, and it's something that I feel is really important. I like to use my privilege to lift up others. So how do I manage to do all of that? I use Trello. So today, I'm going to talk to you about how I use Trello to organize my volunteer life. So these are the 3 nonprofits where I've spent a majority of my time over the last 3 years. And I'm going to talk about them a little bit more in detail. Women Who Code Twin Cities is a network I founded in August of 2016, so 3 years ago. It's a part of a global nonprofit that's dedicated to helping women excel in their technology careers. And they are a nonprofit partner of Summit, so you've probably heard about them already a little bit. The thing I liked most about Women Who Code is that they focus on retention of women in technology over the recruiting pipeline. That's kind of a more unique focus from a lot of the women in technology groups that I've seen. So they offer a global network that serves as a supportive community that helps our members move forward in their technology careers. They also provide scholarships and discounts to conferences like Summit, and they host events globally and through their local networks. Last month, I actually stepped down as director of my network to focus on the next 2 nonprofits, but I will be showing you many, many boards that we worked on. And just a shout out to the other directors that are here. Jen's here today from London, and Glenna spoke yesterday from Berlin, so shout out. App Camp for Girls is another nonprofit that I've been working with. They offer a week-long day camp for girls and gender nonconforming youth that teaches them how to build their very own native iOS apps using Xcode and Swift, so native tools. They focus on youth entering the 8th and 9th grades because that's a time when those kids are usually feeling pressured away from pursuing STEM courses or careers. So we try to engage them by showing them that they can write their very own apps on their own phones, and hopefully they learn that coding is fun, but it's also a career opportunity for them. App Camp started in Portland 5 years ago, and it's grown into 5 other cities. And this summer, which was actually a few weeks ago, we hosted our very first App Camp in the Twin Cities, and I was the lead developer for camp. So next month, I'm actually launching a new nonprofit. It's focused in Minnesota, and it's called Minclude. Our nonprofit is trying to establish stronger connections between all of the diversity and inclusion community groups that we have in our area, so we can all work together to make a bigger impact in our community. So we plan to open channels of communication between all the different groups, and then host collaborative events and provide resources to support local organizers. Since the beginning, Trello has been the backbone for my nonprofit and volunteer operations. It allows me to plan, share, and collaborate with my fellow leaders and our members. And these are 6 areas where I feel like Trello has really helped me succeed. When working with teams, defining roles and responsibilities is an essential part of my planning. And every nonprofit I've worked for has gone about this a little bit differently. So I'm going to show you 3 different ways that we've done this. So this board is for App Camp, and it's defining all of the roles that our camp had available. When I started talking about bringing App Camp to Minneapolis, I didn't have a team yet, and we had over a dozen roles to fill. So I had a lot of work to do just to find the people to make camp happen. So I created this public Trello board to clearly communicate all the needs that we had to fill. And then this spring, I held a volunteers to fill all the roles. This board was public, so anyone could share it, and if they thought someone might be interested, it was easily accessible. Here's an example of one of the roles that we had to fill. You can see that we used labels to group the roles by different categories, so this specific role was non-technical. We used custom fields to show the number of volunteers we needed for each role. Some of the roles had multiple positions. And also the dollar amount of the stipend that we paid our volunteers at the end of camp. The description provided a simple overview of what the role was about, so you could just read it and go, okay, this is what this role is responsible for. And then to get further into detail, we use this checklist to clearly say, here are all the things that are required. And we also wanted to make sure that there were quite a few roles that required you to be at camp the entire week. So it was a 40-hour commitment, and we wanted to make that really clear. So every app camp has pretty much the same set of roles, and they will be the same roles every year and for every camp. So we defined the roles we needed separately from the people who were going to fill those roles. So this was our board for Minneapolis. These are the people that actually stepped into those roles. And then we had their contact information on the cards. So if one team member needed to contact someone else, all that information was right there for them. So this board was not public. This was private. Now this is a Women Who Code Twin Cities board. I color-coded all of the board backgrounds so you would kind of catch on to which one was which. So Women Who Code is blue. When I first founded Women Who Code Twin Cities, I was, again, the only person on the team. And then as we grew the team, I needed to clearly communicate what tasks people needed to perform and who was going to perform them. Different from App Camp, we didn't have a clear set of roles. There wasn't a job description. Each kind of person's tasks were customized to fit their needs or what they wanted to work on. So there was no master list. So in the first list on this board, we defined all the members of the team and contact information. The other list kind of defined all of the tasks that the entire team needed to perform. So from there, we assigned members to each card to make sure we understood who was taking on those tasks. Excuse me. And then we also could kind of visually scan the board, and if we saw one member's icon appearing too much, it was kind of a sign that maybe they were taking on too much work. Burnout is kind of a big thing with community work, so we want to make sure that no one is taking on too much. People get really passionate about helping out, so that's always kind of in the back of our mind. And then we had links to all of our social media accounts and anywhere else that people needed to know how to get to places. So for MinClude, we are still kind of defining what we're going to become. So our board is a work in progress. So you can kind of see at the start of a nonprofit where we're coming from versus something that we've been working on for 3 years. So the leadership team right now is just the founders, but we'll be growing as we find people to help out. We have links to our social media accounts and websites so everyone knows how to get to everything. And then we're kind of defining what services we could provide and brainstorming ways that we could help our community and helping clarify the focus and the mission of our group. And then we are going to expand and articulate on this board as we define who we are and what we're going to do as we grow. So now that we've defined our roles and responsibilities for our teams, how do we actually keep track of what everyone is working on? So this was our camp schedule. It's kind of big and crazy. So we tried to make it easier to understand. But it was the full schedule for camp. So it had the entire timeline of everything that was going to happen and who was in charge of each lesson plan or each task. We used a custom field and named it scheduled from, so we could put in the time range that that task took place. And then we used a custom field to mark the day that it was happening. We had thought about using due dates for this, but we were worried about people getting distracted with a lot of notifications during camp, so we thought, oh, we'll just do that separately. And then one thing we did was add a lot of emojis to the card titles. This helped us visually scan the board and find common tasks and also concisely convey information. So one of the things we did is add a laptop emoji to all of the lesson plans where I needed to teach something in Xcode. So then I'd remember to bring my computer with me to that task. And then we also used food emojis for all of our lunch and snack breaks, so we could just look at the card title and know what we were eating that day. And we actually found food emojis that covered all of our lunches, which was kind of cool. Yay, emojis. So this is one of the lesson plans. This was our walkthrough of Xcode, which is the tool you use to create iOS apps. And you can see there's my laptop emoji, so I remember, bring my computer. Then we assign members, so we know who's in charge of what task. We have labels, so we can group lesson plans or filter by them. So we had a label for all of our presentations. And then here's the scheduled from custom field I talked about. So that was the time slot that we had for this lesson plan. And then we used the Google Drive PowerUp to link to our lesson plans. So this was an instructor guide for this lesson. And we kept all of our curriculum on Google Drive. And then we had a checklist with the main points that we had to cover during that lesson, just so you could visually very quickly go okay, did I hit everything I needed to cover? So Women Who Code has a leadership planning board that we used as our to-do list. We had our travel schedules front and center because we were all very busy and we all traveled a lot and did a lot of conferences. Sometimes we just needed a break, so we went on vacation. But then we would know when our team was available and who would not be available for certain events. We had items we wanted to discuss in the second list. So everyone had time to consider all of the discussion points ahead of time. And as an introvert, this is very important to me. I need time to think about how I feel about a topic. So I love giving this advance notice. And then it also kept our discussions on track because we had a pre-planned agenda for each meeting. The remaining lists are just basic kind of to-do list functionality. We have an inbox for all the events that need to happen during that month. We have an in-progress task list for things that people have started. Then wait hold for we need more information from someone on something before we can move forward, and done for things that were completed. And then we had a quick little backlog for things that we really thought should happen soon, but we didn't have a plan for. So just kind of to keep it fresh in our mind, we should think about this thing, but we're not quite ready to have it be actionable. So there were two main boards that Women Who Code Twin Cities used for tasks. We had the leadership roles board, which was the master list of all the tasks. And then we had the planning board, which is we're actually doing work on specific tasks. So when we wanted to create events in our to-do list, we would copy them over from the roles board into our inbox on the planning board. And then we created a label for each event so we could filter out this is that event, how is that event doing, and kind of see our progress. What we found is manually duplicating a list of cards from one board and putting them into a list on another board was actually kind of cumbersome. So also a huge fan of Butler. We use Butler scripts to automate this. So we had separate cards for 3 different steps in the process. One would copy the list, one added the labels to all the cards in the list, and then the other one would move the cards from the into the inbox on the planning board. And then to run each script, we just opened the card and clicked a link, and boom, it ran it for us. So it's pretty sweet. So task management is really one of the hardest things we had to figure out. So we tried out a few different ideas to find the best thing that worked for us, and I suggest you do that too. Sometimes playing around with different things, you can kind of get a feel for the best way for you to use that board. So our biggest struggle was finding what should be an individual card versus what should be a checklist. So an example of this, when we first started scheduling events, we put an entire checklist of everything that needed to happen for that event. And the good thing was about, like, when you scroll down, you could see everything that had to happen, and then you could get, a progress report on how many tasks you had checked off of that list. The problem was it was really hard to keep track of specific tasks. So we had multiple states of progress, like something was started but hadn't been finished, something we were waiting on more information from a host. They had to give us something in order for that task to proceed, and so we wanted to keep track of what those states were. And then some of our tasks had multiple owners, so it was kind of hard to figure out who was doing what, and then volunteers couldn't filter out just their tasks on the checklist, but a lot of those things we can actually do with cards. So we ended up moving all of our tasks into cards so we could more easily see what was going on. We also, for Women Who Code, had an event brainstorming boards. This was just like, what do we want to do? Like, maybe we want to do a cool VR event. Maybe we want to do this. So we had a leadership meeting and defined 4 programming areas that we wanted to focus on. And we created a label for each of those. So hands-on tech was like coding and technical training. Innovation was like showcasing newer, more kind of like fun technologies. We did like a 3D printing facility tour. We did a big VR event. Professional development was career coaching, leadership skills, like how do you advance in your career. And community was fostering connections between our community members and allies in our community. So each of those had a label, so when we added a card to the board, we'd have to really think about, does this fit into our programming? Like, is this something that really fits and aligns with our mission? So MNclude is still kind of forming, and we have a big launch event coming up next month at the Twin Cities Startup Week. So right now, all of our event logistics is happening in a single board. Usually, I'd have a to-do list board and a separate board for defining other things, but right now we're small enough where it makes sense just to keep everything together. So we're tracking tasks and outreach. We have all the event logistics, and everything is kind of right there where we need it, which is kind of nice. As we grow, this will probably change. So communication and transparency are a really important part of any nonprofit. We need to make sure that our community members understood our mission and how we plan to actually make a difference in our communities. One of the most important communication channels I think that we offered to our community, besides a Slack account, was our news and events board. So this had all of the information we thought members needed to know about our network, but also what was happening in our community. We also used this board to create our monthly newsletter. So we sent out once a month, here's everything that's happening in the Twin Cities that you might want to know about. Here's classes, here's conferences, here's workshops, here's job opportunities. And then this was actually a public board, and it was a livable, crowdsourced document that we could use to provide information on everything happening. And our members could also submit their own ideas. So it wasn't just me working on this board, which was nice. So as I was transitioning off of Women Who Code, I needed to transfer my knowledge into the heads of all the other leaders. So I created a how do I board and tried to put everything okay, you need to submit an expense to Open Collective, which is the tool that we use for tracking our budget and expenses. And the how-to is in here. Here's how to send out the monthly email. Here's all of our logos and branding assets. So this was really helpful way of transitioning, and also they could add cards for okay, I don't know how to do this, and then ping me and I would go and fill it out. Fundraising is an important part of any nonprofit endeavor. As Women Who Code Twin Cities grew, we had to learn how to fundraise, and I will tell you it was a very difficult learning process, but Trello really helped us out here as well. So we started really simple by just finding companies who are willing to host our events. So our host board kind of kept track of all the contacts we had with local companies. This is basically our CRM board. We kept track of who we reached out to and when we talked to them. We pasted emails and comments and had information on like where our relationship stood with every company. On here as well, we kind of did a little bit of scheduling. So the first list was like the schedule for the rest of the year, who is hosting which events. And then the next list was our annual sponsors. So there were companies who purchased a sponsorship package with us, and one of the primary benefits was that they got first choice to pick what month they hosted our event. After they had picked their events, then we reached out to the people who were on our waiting list. So these were like companies that said, we would love to host you, let us know. In the fall, we would pretty much plan out our whole yearly schedule, so we would go to them and let them pick next. And we were lucky enough that we had a really long waiting list. So at that point, we were usually pretty full on our schedule. But if there were any openings or like last-minute changes, we had the list of companies who had already hosted us and would be willing to do so again, likely, if we asked them. And then we kept another list for tracking, like, who have we not talked to yet? Where are companies that we don't have contacts with yet? And then this board is our actual like sponsorship package benefits. So it lists all the different levels that we offered last year, and then what like our package levels were. I thought this was really important to be very transparent about like what does it cost, what do you get out of it. For nonprofits especially, I think it's like transparency is really key. So this was one of my favorite boards. We held a silent auction last year for a big fundraising event, and like our members made a bunch of really cool stuff. So we had like a Women Who Make group last year that would get together and we made like LED pins, and we did that for the event, or like handmade jewelry. Some of the jewelry like lit up because it was electronic. We had 3D printed like objects and trinkets. We had Sony donated a bunch of PlayStation games and accessories. Members donated things as well. In Trello, like the visual format of it made it really easy to see like what are we selling. We used custom fields to note like what the estimated value of each item was and what the purchase price was at the end. So we knew exactly where the money came from. Trello can be a great tool for getting feedback, for providing resources, and crowdsourcing information. So I read a lot of articles and books and things about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I keep track of all my recommended resources on this board. So part of our focus at MnClude is to be a resource for people who are actually committed to like making change and taking actions toward building a more equitable tech community. So this board is a way that we can like provide those resources to them. When people come to us with questions, we have the links ready to hand out. And we'll be growing this board as we grow our nonprofit. So this is an example of one of the resources I have on there. We found that Twitter can be a really powerful resource to hear firsthand experiences from underrepresented communities and people working in technology. And the Twitter Power Up is a great way to just like embed that content into a card so people open it and they can already read it. They don't have to click on a link. So this is one of the events we had for Women Who Code Twin Cities was around self-care. And I didn't know an awful lot about self-care. I'm super bad at it. But I think it's kind of a common experience. So we crowdsourced like discussion items for our event. So it ended up being kind of a roundtable discussion. We just got in a big circle, and we had all of these ideas that we had generated before the event. So I sent a link out to this board and asked people to add to it, and I just kind of had some questions like to try and help them get ideas. And then we went over the board at the event, and it was a really great way to kind of like crowdsource content for our event. So we try to use power-ups whenever we can because they integrate really nicely with all the other applications we use. So here are a few of my favorites. I think Bentley mentioned Zapier, but IFTTT is another option. We use this for getting anonymous feedback from people. So you can set up a Google form to collect anonymous information, and then use the integration to send that to a Trello card. And then we can kind of categorize and group that information as we receive it. I use Butler all the time. I love Butler. It helps to keep a lot of the repetitive tasks to a minimum, and as someone who's very busy, I try to get rid of busy work as much as I can. We use Slack for communicating within all of my organizations, and we connect to our private leadership Slack channels into our Trello board, so anytime our board is updated, we get notifications. And then Google Drive is where we usually store and share documentation or like curriculum for camp, also branding and other information that people need access to. So Trello has been an essential tool for my nonprofit work to help me collect, communicate, and share information with leaders and members. And because it's so flexible, you can use it for a whole lot more. But I hope I've given you some ideas on how you can use Trello to help organize your volunteer life. Thank you.